on with Simone Perry at Good News Broadcast. Thank you for being with us today, Beverly.
I'm happy to be here, Simone.
And you're the author of Understanding Other People, The 5 Secrets to Human Behavior. And I was asking you before, are you excited about the royal wedding?
Well, any event like this, Simone, I'm always excited to watch the people around it and how everybody behaves. I have a keen interest in human behavior, so any big event like this, I would say I look at with anticipation and excitement because it's always a learning experience.
Sure. And now, how can newlyweds continue to maintain their own individual happiness and not always be affected by each other's moods?
Well, the one big aspect is that, as I talk about in my book, Secret Number 1, it's all about me, and that has to do with the filters that we have on the world. One of the things that we're unaware of when we go into new relationships, certainly romantic relationships or a new marriage, is that we have our expectations about the way that things should be, the way we should be treated, or the way our marriage should be. And what we don't realize is that our mate, the person coming into it with us, also has their expectations about the way that it should be. And so one of the things that I counsel people to do, and hopefully Prince William and Kate will do this or have done this, is to define together what is it that we want this relationship to be. How do we want to treat one another? How do we want to communicate? And not make the assumption that somebody else knows and that we are in agreement, but rather make sure that we're in agreement.
Absolutely. Now, how can Kate and William work past any comparisons to Prince Charles and Diana?
Well, there's going to be, obviously, the many people that are going to make the analogy and are going to be looking for the ways that the two of them are the same, maybe the ways that they're different. The reality is that Prince William and Kate cannot do anything to control what other people do, think about, the lens that they put on what they're doing. What they can do is just make their own decisions and in some ways chart their own path, refuse to be defined by what's come before them. And I think we're already seeing that in the approach that they're taking to the guest list for the wedding, some of the choices that they've made. They're doing it their way, and they don't seem to be burdened by the traditional, well, we have to do this or we have to do that. And that's the most important thing. We can't do anything to change somebody's view on us, but we can decide that we're still going to make a different choice, and however it gets perceived is how it gets perceived. I think for them to worry too much about Charles and Diana is just going to be a negative impact on them, so they have to just forge their own path and do what they want to do.
Now, how can we accept and also recognize that our spouse's way of communicating and their behavior style is different from our own?
Well, there's a couple key pieces. I mean, one thing is that we do tend to look to another person and say they're going to define, do I have a good day? Do I have a bad day? How happy am I going to be? So first and foremost, I think it's really making sure that we feel good about ourselves separate and apart from what our mate is doing in their emotional state. We're a couple, and you want to honor that relationship, but we're still separate people, and I don't want to be defined by you. I have to define happiness for myself. The other thing is just watching our communication styles and how different we may be in communication. I may be somebody who's maybe I'm more thoughtful, and I don't like to talk about things until I've thought about them, and I'm a little bit more low-key, and I'm non-emotional. I may be in a relationship with somebody who's a talker, who's a fast mover, who's a get-it-done. And we have to be careful because we do tend to expect that the other person is like us and should communicate like us. We need to take the time to learn more. Who's this person and what's the kind of communication that works for them?
Sure. Now, how do you, even when these problems arise, how do you maintain a level of intimacy, even when they have these problems, whether it's communicating? How do you still, make the effort to stay close?
Yes. So there's a few pieces to this. Number one is that it's very important when we're not in conflict to take the time to sit down. I call it the ground rules, but we can talk about it in different ways, maybe establishing what's important in our relationship. But when we're not in conflict, to sit down and do that, because what happens is we typically look at these issues when we're in a conflict situation, right? We address them only because we have to. I encourage people, whether it's in a work relationship, a romantic relationship, a sibling relationship, let's talk about how we want this relationship to be during a time that's calm, that we're not on fire because of something that's happening. The other part about it is there's nothing wrong with doing what I call a retake. I have a teenage daughter, and she certainly knows how to push my buttons, and I know how to push hers. And so,
I have an almost teen, so I understand what you're saying.
right? As much as we may know, Simone, sometimes when we're in the middle of it, we forget. And so, there's nothing wrong though with doing a retake. And I will go into her room sometimes and say, you know what? I'd like to do a retake. I handled this badly. I know we've talked about doing it this way. Can we start over? And she may say, I can't right now, Mom, but then it certainly is something that later she'll come to me and we can talk about it. So in some ways, if we can establish these ground rules, even when we get in the heat of the battle, which we're all likely to do, we're able to do a retake and go back again and say, what do I really value here? Do I value coming out as a winner and being the one with the last word, or do I value this relationship and strengthening this relationship?
Right. And I have one last question for you, Beverly. What is good news for you?
Good news for me? Good news on any given day, I guess honestly, good news for me is when, for me, I feel like my kids are happy, and there is a sense of people really, in my household and the people that I'm working with every day, there's a sense of people really trying to work to understand one another. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect and that there aren't bumps in the road, but at least people are making they're making it a priority to try to understand. And when I have that happening, whether it be in my work situation, in my personal life, that's really good news for me, because I feel like people get a chance for that aha, and they learn something about each other. And every time we do that, we learn something about ourselves.
Beverly, thank you so much for being with us today.
You were great, Simone. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Bye now.